A Tennison Gambit setup looks like this, where white offers the e4 pawn for free. And this setup of Tennison Gambit can be arrived by any one of these two openings. The first way is by playing the Scandinavian opening. So white plays e4, black plays d5, which is the Scandinavian, and now white plays knight to f3, offering this pawn for free. This Tennison Gambit can also be reached by playing the Reti opening. So white starts the game with knight to f3, taking control of the dark center squares. Now since black cannot play e5, he will mostly play d5, and now white can play e4, offering the pawn for free and entering into the Tennison Gambit. Now let's quickly look at the common Tennison Gambit traps which you can use in your games against a player playing with the black pieces. So the important thing over here is, in order for your opponent to fall into one of the Tennison Gambit traps, he has to accept this gambit. So he will have to play d into e4. So when the player accepts the gambit, then there are a few traps that you can lay out for the black player. So let's look at all of them. So white starts with e4, black plays d5, white plays knight f3, offering the pawn for free, and now black accepts the pawn, and now white can play knight to g5, attacking this e4 pawn. Now here, if black wants to have a good game, then he should just forget about this pawn and focus on the development. But instead, if black tries to hold on to this pawn by giving him extra protection by playing a move like knight to f6 or bishop to f5 or pawn to f5 or queen to d5, then white will get tremendous advantage in the game. How? Well, let's first look at what happens when black tries to protect this pawn by getting his queen to the d5 square. So queen comes on d5, protecting this pawn and also attacking this unprotected knight. White now plays d3, attacking this pawn one more time and also providing defense to the unprotected knight. Now since black cannot capture this knight and his pawn is awkwardly placed here on the e4 square, in most of the cases black will get greedy and try to take one more pawn by playing e into d3. So now here white can simply capture back this pawn with his light square bishop, and now here most of the black players would rejoice because they can now capture this free pawn on g2. And since they cannot resist their temptation to capture one more free pawn, black will mostly play queen into g2, capturing the pawn and now attacking this rook. But here is the key moment now, because black has fallen into white's trap, because white can now play bishop to e4, attacking this queen and also protecting this undefended rook. Black's queen cannot go to all of these squares because they are well controlled by the white's army. So the only option left for queen is to go on the g4 square, where it has protection of his light squared bishop. But now this light squared bishop of black is overloaded with the defensive responsibilities, because not only now he is providing protection to the queen, but he is also obliged to give protection to this b7 pawn. And because black's bishop can protect only one piece at a time, so whites take advantage of this situation and goes for a queen trade. So white plays queen into g4, black is forced to play bishop into g4, and now white plays bishop into b7, attacking the trapped rook which cannot be protected in any case. Black will be down a whole rook and white has a complete winning advantage in the game. Now let's look at the second trap. So what happens when black tries to protect the pawn with a move like knight to f6? Let's see. So white plays e4, d5, knight f3, black captures, white attacks back the pawn, and now black protects this pawn with knight to f6. Because black is not willing to let go of this pawn, you can use that greedy mindset of him against him by offering him one more pawn. So white plays d3. Now since black's pawn is awkwardly placed here and he loves being ahead in material, he will definitely capture this pawn on d3. Now white can simply capture back the pawn and develop his light square bishop, and as you can see, white's knight and white's light square bishop, both of them are eyeing the weak h7 pawn. Also white's knight is keeping an eye on the weak f7 pawn. And because white's knight is sitting in black's territory, a lot of beginners here get very uncomfortable. And because both these pieces are eyeing this h7 pawn, black immediately wants to get rid of this knight sitting in his territory. So a lot of players would play a horrible move like h6 over here, thinking that now the knight will retrieve back. He plays a shocking amazing move, and that is knight into f7, forking black's queen and black's rook. Because black doesn't like to suffer loss in material, he will now capture this knight back with his king. But after the king moved here, you can see that black's queen now is completely undefended, and taking advantage of this situation, white can now play bishop to g6 check, revealing a discovered attack on the undefended black queen. It doesn't matter whether the black king captures this bishop or decides to move to any of these squares, because black is going to lose his queen in the next turn. Let's look at one more variation when black tries to defend the pawn with knight f6. So white starts with e4, d5, knight f3, black takes, white attacks, black protects with knight, and now instead of playing d3 over here, white can add one more attacker to this pawn by one of his minor pieces, and that is knight to c3. Now this pawn has two attackers and only one defender. So black tries to add another defender by playing bishop to f5. Here, since the white knight is already eyeing the weak f7 square, white decides to develop another minor piece while attacking this weak square and also preparing to castle. So white plays bishop to c4. Now this f7 pawn is attacked twice, defended only once, and white is ready to castle in the game. Since black cannot afford to lose this pawn, he blocks the bishop's diagonal by playing e6. And here white decides to play f3. The idea is, if the pawn capture backs on f3, then white can develop his queen with a tempo. Black, being a greedy and a beginner, he accepts the pawn on f3. And now white queen captures back this pawn, activates his queen on this beautiful diagonal, attacking this weak b7 pawn, also getting his queen in the line of the f file. And now white can then castle king side, get his rook on the f file and put more pressure on this f file. Black obviously doesn't like all of these plans, so first he decides to protect this b7 pawn by playing c6. So by playing c6, black is blocking the diagonal for the queen. But here white has a very good tactical shot, and that is white can now sacrifice his knight on the f7 square, forking black's queen and black's rook. Black now captures back on f7 with his king, and now white can take the bishop because this pawn cannot capture back the queen because it's pinned to the white's bishop. Here in the game, though the material is equal, but by playing the Tennison Gambit, white is far ahead in development. White has developed 3 of his pieces, whereas black has developed only 1 piece. White is ready to castle king side and put more pressure on the f file with the queen and the rook battery, whereas black king has lost his castling rights. Also black has a weak e6 pawn, which is a clear target for white. So in all, though the material looks equal, white has a lot of advantage in the game as compared to his black opponent. Let's go back a few moves. Now since we have seen how the white can sacrifice his knight on this f7 pawn and get a better game, hence a lot of times here players do not play c6, but rather they play h6, trying to attack this knight to kick him out of the black's territory. But here this h6 move doesn't help because white can anyway now capture back on f7, king captures back, and now white queen can take this bishop with a better position and better game for white. Let's go back a few moves. So we saw that c6 is not working, h6 is not working. Then how can black defend? Well, a good move for black would be to play knight to c6, blocking this diagonal and also activating his minor piece that can be helpful in the game. So what happens when black plays knight to c6? How should white play? Well, white can still sacrifice his knight on the f7 square. Black captures with his king, queen captures the bishop, and now black can attack your queen with a move like knight to d4. Black has centralized his knight, is attacking the queen as well as the weak c2 pawn. Since white doesn't want to lose the c2 pawn and give any kind of counter activity to the black opponent, white should get back his queen to the d3 square. Now black's develop his kingside bishop so that he can get his rook out and take his king to the corner of the board where he is much safer. So black plays bishop to c5, developing a minor piece, adding extra protection to this knight and clearing the way for the rook. And now here white shouldn't hurry to castle kingside, because then black would be able to create discovered attacks with his knight by checking the white's king. So before castling, white should try to get rid of this beautifully placed dark squared bishop. So white plays knight to e4, centralizing white's knight and also attacking this unprotected bishop and also attacking this knight. If black takes his bishop back, then white would have a very good knight sitting over here in the center of the board. Black doesn't want white's knight to take up the center, so that is why black captures this knight with his knight. And now white captures back with his queen. And here the black king is still open on the f file. He wants to quickly go back here. So he plays rook to e8 so that the rook is activated and now the king can move to this square at any point of time. And now here, before trying to castle, because you know then there would be some discovered checks and attacks, white first tries to kick off these minor pieces. So therefore white plays c3. Black's knight should move, but where should he move? Should he move to this square or this square? So since white's queen is attacking this h7 pawn over here, so if black decides to go on the f5 square by blocking this diagonal for the queen, then black can lose this knight because this pawn is still pinned to the king because of this light square bishop. So he cannot move. So here white would be down a piece. Let's go back a few moves. So black goes back on c6 and now white plays d4, attacking this bishop and also blocking his diagonal. Bishop comes to d6 and now queen can take the h7 pawn with a very good game, because white is about to castle kingside and activate his rook on the f file. White's light squared and dark squared bishops are aiming at the king side and white can quickly get the other rook into play on the f file or on the e file and start a beautiful kingside attack. White is ahead in development and has a complete winning advantage. If you are enjoying learning these traps, then do like this video and subscribe to my channel. And now let's look at the third kind of trap. What happens when black tries to protect the pawn with bishop to f5? Let's have a look on the board. e4, d5, knight f3, black takes, white attacks. And now black protects this pawn with his light squared bishop. So he plays bishop to f5. So what can white play now? White can attack this pawn one more time by playing knight to c3. Black protects this pawn one more time by playing knight to f6. And now white attacks this pawn one more time with his queen. And here black protects this pawn one more time by playing queen to d4. And now this is a horrible move because black has fallen into white's trap, because white can now give check to the black king by playing queen to b5. And with this move, white has actually forked black's pieces, because white is not only checking the king, but white's queen is also attacking this unprotected b7 pawn as well as attacking this unprotected light squared bishop. Since black cannot afford to lose his bishop, black blocks the check by playing bishop to d7. And now white captures the free b7 pawn and attacking this trapped rook. Black now plays a logical move, which is bishop to c6, attacking this queen and also extending protection to this trapped rook. But here white plays a brilliant move, and that is bishop to b5, attacking this bishop and pinning him to the black king. So now the bishop cannot take our queen. And now since black's bishop is attacked twice by the white pieces, black needs to defend, and hence he gets his queen to the d7 square. White takes the bishop, black takes back, and now it looks that black has saved his position because his trapped rook can now no longer be captured, and this position might lead to a trade of queens. But here, instead of going for the normal moves, white ends the game by playing queen to c8 checkmate. Wasn't that a brilliant move? If you also want to improve your chess game and play more such brilliant moves, then do join to the membership program of this channel. And now let's look at the last trap. So what happens when black tries to defend his pawn with a move like f5? Let's see. e4, d5, knight f3, d into e4, knight g5, attacking the pawn, and now black defends the pawn with f5. So what should white play now? Well, f5 is really not a good move. And the reason why I say this, because in an attempt to hold on to this extra pawn, black has weakened his e8 h5 kingside diagonal, which makes black king more vulnerable. And now white can play bishop to c4. The idea is, since the white knight is already eyeing the weak f7 square, by playing bishop to c4, he is adding one more attacker to this square. And now white is threatening to fork black's pieces. Black needs to defend, so he plays knight to h6. And now what should white play? Well, white should try to focus on developing his other pieces and getting rid of this pawn by playing d3. Black takes the e-pawn, and now instead of wasting time in capturing this e-pawn with your knight and leading a trade of queens, white should actually take advantage of black's situation, because black's king is still in the middle, his pieces are still stuck and are undeveloped, and since white is ahead in development with a possible good looking attack, white should quickly castle so that he can activate his rook and start an attack on the black king. And here a lot of beginners do not understand such kind of positional advantages and disadvantages, and they just focus on getting more material in the game. So a lot of beginners will play d into c2, taking one more pawn. And now white can capture back this pawn with his queen, and though white is down 2 pawns, but white has a very good attacking game because his rook is about to be activated on the e file. The queen is already eyeing this pawn. White's minor pieces are eyeing the weak f7 square. This bishop is controlling this diagonal. So white pieces are far more active and are ready to launch an attack as compared to black's pieces who are still sitting inside their home. So do try out these gambit variations in your own game and let me know how did they go. Here it is white's turn in the game. So you have to tell me in the comments box that what should white play. I will wait for your answers and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep learning, keep practicing.